All right, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for attending our workshop, July 3rd at 2 p.m. I'll call the workshop to order, and we'll start with a pledge of allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So amendment and approval of the agenda. I do want to make one amendment, which is to allow a public comment. I spoke to Mr. Wilson earlier, and he has some information that is directly related to this topic. So I'd like to add that ahead of discussion item, if that's okay.
Fine with me.
All right.
Approval is amended.
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor? Yes.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-0. So that would be public comment. Joe Wilson.
Okay. How are we doing, Rod? Hello, Joe. Very well. I thought I would come out knowing that Rod was here and the similarities in our counties. First thing I'd like to say, and I want to comment about something Ted said, something I agree with, by the way, so defensive. In the early portion of the budget discussions, after the defeat of the levy, you mentioned how you felt that maybe the solution to our problems doesn't lie as much with the county commissioners, that it was with something else. I misquoted you, but I think that was your meeting. Mm-hmm. And I believe that to be true. I think that the solution will have to come from the county, from the citizens. The Board of Commissioners are our leaders, and they can lead us down the path to those solutions. But to find those solutions, the citizens are going to have to find that. And the way they find that is, and this is where you can help, this is where you can lead, is one thing, somebody once said that information is power. You have to give the citizens the power of that information. There's a lot of things that the citizens of this county and Coos don't know that they should know. And it isn't just, I think that you tend to have funnel vision on what you can control, which is your general fund. But the taxes in this county are a lot more than just the general fund. We have over 40 taxing districts in Curry County, and I think, Rod, you probably have twice that many. 70, yes.
Yeah. That's a lot of money. And where is all that money going? And a lot of people don't know. They're paying all these taxes, and they get hit here and they get hit there. And that's why they have a problem paying more taxes, because they do feel like they're overtaxed. I mean, that's why the levies were defeated. Not because of the issues that they funded, but more because of the feeling about how they're taxed. So the information that I think the citizens need more than anything, and something I don't know, something I'd like to know, how much money is collected in taxes in Curry County? And where does that money go? And where most of the money goes, is that the number one priority in the county? Should we be looking at the money that we have, where we're spending it, and then try to find solutions to properly prioritize that? That's what, I'm not arguing for more taxes. I'm arguing for a path, for a solution. And it may involve more taxes and it may not, but until we get the information out there, because the one thing I've found, the people of this county and the people of Coos that I know, very smart people, and they care. And a lot of them, they're busy doing their jobs and doing whatever they have to do to make a living or get by. And they don't have time. But if you give them this information, and then you have your workshops about that and prioritizing, I think we may be able to find a solution. That's the comment I wanted to make today. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So as both of you guys know, and Patrick,
I've talked with Commissioner Taylor regularly, talked to him ahead of the election. We discussed each other's levies, funding solutions, et cetera. So when I spoke to Rod earlier this week, we thought it would be a good idea for him to come here and directly share that information with everybody, that feedback he's getting from his town halls and community, and the ideas that he's coming up with. And then, Rod, I think I mentioned to you that Patrick has a couple ideas that he's bringing in that might be something that we can kind of collaborate on. So that is the purpose of this workshop today. So, Commissioner Taylor, I'll turn it over to you, and we can start with you.
Thank you, Commissioner. It seems to me that whatever we do, we as counties in the southwest part of the state are on a collision course for insolvency with the constant pressures of inflation affecting our operations and the constant decline of revenues, or at least revenues that are not pacing with inflation. And it's been a perpetual problem for quite a while now. And that if we find collaborative solutions that we can be aligned on as counties and implement similar strategies concurrently, that we could be very effective. For instance, if we were all to look at some sort of a sales tax, and there are several different ideas regarding that topic that I'd like to lay out for you today. If Coos, Curry, and Douglas were all to employ such a strategy simultaneously, that would reduce the dynamic of cross-county merchant creep, or whatever you want to call it. So with that having been said, that's my primary motivation to be here with you all, because we all face the same problems to varying degrees. So there are a few different sales tax concepts that we've been toying with. The first is what I've called the tax swap. Now, again, these ideas are going to be maybe not as applicable for you all as they would be for us because of our different real estate tax base, our different retail sales volumes. There are a lot of things that play into it, but I'll speak to the Coos County statistics. If the tax swap in Coos County essentially would mean possibly a 2% sales tax applied to all retail sales, with a cap placed somewhere maybe at $5,000, maybe at $10,000, and anything beyond that on a single purchase wouldn't be taxed. Groceries, unprepared food, and pharmaceuticals would not be subject to the tax. And my estimation, based on 2017 U.S. Census Bureau statistics for retail sales in Coos County, those retail sales about $1.1 billion. And so I estimate that such a 2% sales tax would raise somewhere around $20 million. Maybe a little less, maybe a little more, depending on exactly how it's structured. For us, what that would mean is we would be able to levy our permanent rate, which is $1.08 per thousand. We'd be able to levy that rate at zero. And so our property owners, those taxpayers, would see a reduction on a $300,000 house of a little over $300 a year. In order for that same household to spend $300 on sales tax, they would have to spend about $21,000 of taxable retail money in the county. Are most households going to do that? Possibly. So does that mean
a slight net tax increase to those families? Possibly it could, but if they happen to be a very frugal family, then they would not. So one functional difference that it makes is that it transfers a significant portion of the burden of our general fund off of the backs of those property owners and onto tourists and travelers, transients, which is a very big benefit to the residents of the county. Another big benefit is that it tracks inflation. It's not stagnant. And that's one of the problems that we have with our permanent rate levies. As you all know, we can't keep current enough with assessments, and combined with our 3% increase limit, there's no way that property taxes can pace with inflation. A sales tax does do so. The tax swap concept was the first idea that I was actually, the retail sales tax was the first idea that was brought to me, and I developed it into the tax swap. So this was the first concept that we were working with, and that's sort of the rough outline of it. The second idea is a straight up sales tax with no tax swap, no promised reduction in the permanent rate levy. And that tax has two very distinctively different features from the tax swap. Number one is the rate would be higher. It would be more like 5%. As I said, it would not involve a discount in the tax levy. However, the feature that I think denotes its probable greater success is that if we levied it at 5% in Coos County and then exempted anyone who shows an ID at point of purchase that shows that they live in Coos County, exempt from the sales tax. That means that sales tax is entirely borne by tourists, travelers, transients. That sort of a format looks like it would raise maybe somewhere around $12 million for the general fund in Coos County. So that's, again, not enough to reduce the levy on the permanent rate, but there's no additional tax borne by Coos County residents in that model. And for us, that would be enough to cover what our deficits are and be able to actually add the district attorneys and the sheriff patrols that we really need to effectively prosecute crime in the county. The third idea is a special fee that's assessed annually on short-term rentals that are owned by parties who do not live in the county. That's a significant problem for us.
This year too.
Yeah, we have multiple outside parties who own one or up to maybe a dozen or more vacation rentals in the county. And all they pay is that property tax. And yet they represent an inordinate, disproportionate burden upon the law enforcement mechanisms that we have in place. So, and given the relative poverty that we face as counties, it seems a reasonable approach to consider encumbering those with a fee that could be. My vision for this is that fee, the revenues from that, could be utilized to significantly fund our community development department, thus allowing them to reduce their permit fees, which would have a stimulating effect on construction in the county. So those are the three basic ideas that are out there right now, you know what I'm looking at, and I'd really love to hear what you all have to think about that, and and certainly any other ideas that are out there, you know, we need to work collaboratively and cooperatively to effect the right kind of change.
So, I'll start with a couple questions. Rod, on your third idea, do you know how many, the number of short-term rentals you guys have? You know?
No, I don't have that number yet, Brad. I've asked for that data, they're working on it, unknown at this point. The problem is that we have licensed and unlicensed, or permitted and unpermitted. What I envision is of assessing this fee even on the unpermitted ones, just on basis of observation, you know, whatever field investigation to figure out, yeah, this is definitely a short-term rental. But I don't know what that number is.
And do you guys have a target number that you need for a fully funded sheriff's office, fully funded DA?
Yeah, if our general fund were augmented by $8 million a year, we would be able to have 9 ADAs. We would be able to add 4 patrol positions to the sheriff's department, which would afford us 3 deputies on patrol, a minimum of 3 at 24/7. And it would allow us to open the third pod in the jail, which would be 150 beds. We just a couple of months ago opened our second pod, which brought us to 98 beds. We have not filled that yet, but it is creeping up. Of course, the public defender quandary has had a little bit of an attritional effect on jail population, but I don't expect that to last terribly long. And as a side note, I'll say that at that 8 million augmentation to our general fund, I believe that we might be able to, as a county, actually employ full-time a public defender who's paid by the county but works for the clients that he represents, and therefore we would be able to keep some of those dangerous individuals incarcerated.
So since we talked last, actually right around levy time, we had a discussion about some of your ideas, and I looked at what our revenue was from retail sales. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rabia, do you remember that number? It was like 230 million, somewhere in 232. So quite a bit different from 1.1 billion,
Billion.
right?
Yeah.
With a B.
Yeah, that's a big number.
So, yeah, quite a bit different. And if we went off our last target number, which when I say last, off of the levy that was rejected, that number that we needed for the sheriff's office was around $8 million. To have a sheriff's office that's staffed well enough to be 24/7 patrol agency, and a district attorney prosecute all crimes and keep our jail at full capacity. So that would put that percentage at about, I don't know, rough estimate, 4.5%, 5% for us taxing everything. So I don't know that would have a lot of support for us. We certainly couldn't swap the property tax revenue that we get in. So I don't know. Those are my initial kind of looking at a sales tax issue. We had looked at it before. We actually looked at it and did some research on it before we came up with the levy option that we had. Those were just some of the rough numbers, but anyway. Anybody else?
I just recently got some of these numbers through, in terms of annual revenue in the county through Advanced Health, through a recent study they did. I was just gonna pull it up, because I think I have, according to this, different numbers. It was that 2 number, in 2020 during COVID.
232
Something, yeah, the most recent one that I saw was 378. However, I just want to confirm that, because I got to identify exactly where that data was pulled. But my concern is that with the potential exclusions to that you had discussed, but groceries, pharmaceuticals, etc., that that number would greatly diminish.
Yeah.
That the majority of the sales that we have, we don't have large scale sales, offerings. It's
Car lots and
it's
stuff like that.
It's boutiques and grocery stores, right? For the most part, and so I would want to be much more diligent in finding out what our annual food driving revenue looks like, outside of prepared foods, but your grocery store revenues, and so when I did the math off of the money that we just looked at, here's the one thing that I would probably bring up in conversation when we talk about the swap tax, the tax swap, because it appears like the tax swap on its very face would be like a why not, right? I mean, you're going to remove my property tax liability, which for us and you, for us it's 59 cents on the 1,000, and yours is $1.08. When people realize that the amount of tax on their actual tax bill doesn't go down that much, that probably might be different. But on the surface, it seems very, I think there's a lot of intrigue with that idea. However, I think I'm going to get to it here in just a second. The one thing that I would be worried or cautious about in 100% reliance on a sales tax is that when you do face a year of economic distress, your funding immediately dissipates. It's not a slow withdrawal, and there was a lot of cities that little towns, especially in the California area, in Northern California, that really suffered during COVID when nobody was buying anything, and they relied on sales tax mainly to fund their government. There was a lot of, so having that as just being 100% reliant on it is, I think, worth investigating, and it's intriguing. The idea is very intriguing. But there's also a risk, right? And so I'm trying to pull up those numbers because they had a 10-year look back on those numbers, and I had just looked at it this week. So, anyways, go ahead.
While you're looking, Jay, Mr. Wilson asked a question about where does the tax money go in Curry County, and I'll just kind of give you an idea, Joe. If you pay, let's say that you paid $3,000 in property taxes for the year, then the general fund for Curry County would see about $200 out of that, and the rest of that money would be distributed to municipalities, special districts,
Schools.
schools,
a large
education, that type of
63%.
63%.
63% of your tax goes to the school districts. If you live in the municipalities, it's roughly high 30s, and then from there it's a bunch of tick marks, right, all the way down. It kind of completes the circle. Actually, we have that. It's in our budget presentation on the total amounts collected for the county. I should have this in front of me, Joe, I apologize, but I want to say it's in the 29 to 31 million, right in that window. That's countywide, all districts combined. Now, what's interesting is, for us in particular, when you take the majority of all those districts, so you take everything but schools, cities, and county, and you take those out, so you're left with fire districts, ports, libraries, cemeteries, sanitary,
Water.
water.
Ambulance.
No, we don't have one.
I think there's
4-H.
Yeah.
When you take those ones, all those combined, all the fire districts, all the ports, everything, libraries, etc. The total was surprising to me. The total for all of those was only $4.7 million. Because they're only receiving it within their district. There's a whole bunch of districts. Obviously, none of us are taxed on all 40 districts. We all have our little slice of district areas. But so if those were, as has thought in the past, if those would have been even just completely removed and replaced into county services, it wouldn't have been enough.
Well, if our target number was 8 million, we'd be 4 million short.
Yeah, 3.3.
I think a lot of those special districts are delivering a service in a more efficient way than the county would be able to do that, in some instances. So that's partly why they were, but I think the idea of the sales tax / swap would be a great way to get to Joe's idea so that people could see, you have to be able to differentiate, because when people think about paying their taxes, they think they're paying the county, and they're not.
They're not.
And that's it. It's communicating that issue and that reality out in a way that people can understand is it's hard to remember. I mean, it's a tough one. It's kind of anti common sense to a certain degree, but at the same time, I just think back, like if you were to, a couple of years ago, when I was on the library board, the county was talking about wanting the library board to hand over its money back to the county. Well, that would probably entail that the county would then be in charge of the Chetco Library District, right? The way that the county is set up with the employment, with the unions, with everything that we've got, that's not an efficient way to deliver a library service. That's a way to end up not having a library. So that's a decision that people need to make. Right. I think that it would be foolish to try to undertake. Here's another terrible example. It's a great example. We're not in a position to do all these little rural fire departments. And those things are, well, we've seen the people come into these meetings, and they're laying their lives on the line, and they're retired, they're old, they're weak, they're doing the best they can, they're getting donated materials in many cases, and they're delivering a service in a way that all we can do is back them up.
With volunteers.
Right, exactly. And now that you take that model and you apply it to, say, the sheriff's department. We develop we'll say you develop a better reserve force, right? Then I don't know how that works, but it works in the fire world. It's working there, but to some degree, would it work in law enforcement? I don't know. Something to think about.
Hey, Rod, I know you've had some town halls and community discussions. What kind of feedback have you gotten on these ideas?
It's been mixed. I've gotten a fair amount of positive feedback from people that I would consider to be on the right side of the aisle. And actually, I've gotten positive feedback from people on the left side of the aisle. It's really it's really hard to fully quantify, Brad. But it seems to me that the majority of people that I speak to seem to be in favor of it. Now, Then again, I go and I look at the What's Happening in Coos County page on Facebook, and there's no end of inanity in comments there. People just have no clue what they're talking about. And the mantra that I see repeated there is, well, the county needs to learn how to manage their money, they're wasteful, which just simply is not true. My continued statement there is, yeah, there might be a little pocket of some wasteful thing here or there, but it doesn't amount to anywhere near what we're facing in terms of shortages. That's not the problem. And I know that's going to be the case here as well. But I think generally people favor it. I do have a sense that Coos County residents would probably favor the higher sales tax rate with a resident exemption above the tax swap. It's less confusing, it's very straightforward, and it places virtually no burden on Coos County residents. And as an addendum, I'll also say that in the tax swap and the straight up sales tax, I also have been saying that I believe it would be appropriate to allow merchants responsible for collecting that tax to retain 5% of the monies collected in order to defray their costs of collecting it.
That would help, because my first thought was they're going to not collect it and just default to everybody as a citizen, right? So if you have a collection fee, then I think you make some self-accountability there. That's a good thought there. But yeah, I was able to pull up some of those numbers. The numbers that they gave us, 2021 was 385 million. 2020 was 296 million. So it was a 30% increase from 2020 to 2021. So when you, like I said, when you're reliant on that, a 30% change in an annual situation can be pretty devastating.
If it were to go down,
Right.
that's
the threat.
That's an economic collapse, basically, is what you see happen
That's
in
what
that
we- yeah.
scenario.
But does it, if there's an economic collapse, is it any easier for property owners to meet those burdens? I mean, the reality is the reality. You're just assuming that property owners are gonna, why are they required to hold up the end for everybody when this would be a more equitable tax? I mean, you lose services because the economy collapses, then you lose services. So it's a fair outcome.
And I'll add to that, Ted, that I think what you're saying is that such economic conditions that would result in a retail downturn are also going to place greater economic pressures on landowners and their ability to pay their property tax bill. And they've got 5 years before their land gets repossessed.
Right.
So, or tax lien. So that's a lot of economic, or that's a lot of a long time of lost revenue that we could still be facing even in the current model that we're using.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, like in 2019, it was 431 million. So it went 431, 296, so it was a little over a 40%. Then 385, it bounced back the next year. So regardless, just, something, but in terms of looking at numbers, we would still need to be able to delineate what it would look like for the removal of, the grocery stores and the pharmaceutical.
And now what's the justification for that? Just, I mean, I understand, I also think, from my perspective, I think that there's, like, I'll just start by saying that the short-term rental, limiting that to out-of-state property owners, I would say that you're gonna get sued, you're gonna lose. that's a restraint on trade. There's a variety of different things that can happen there. But if somebody wants to buy a piece of property and run a business in a county, then they don't need to be a resident to do that. So I think that would be a thing that we should shy away from. But at the same time, I understand, I get it that the voters would be happy to not pay, to not be responsible and like to put it all on the tourists. But there's a point where the tourists are going to be like, hey, this is not, we're not coming. And so, so if there's a way to have a lower tax that's applied across the board to everybody, and if you're going to live here, right now, if you live in a county in Oregon, and you're paying property tax, and if you're a property owner, and there are an awful lot of people that are not directly involved in that equation. Now, if they're renters, they're paying for it, but they're not participating, so they're not aware of it. It's just kind of like having taxes withheld from your paycheck. The worst thing that can happen to you, because once you don't realize that you're not aware of how much you're not getting, then you're kind of anesthetized to the reality. And so I think I like the idea of a sales tax because that involves everybody. And to be honest, a lot of the people that are really using a lot of the services that the county provides, specifically law enforcement, should not be exempted from participation. I just feel like that as a resident of Curry County, I want everybody treated the same way I am. And so that's why I would lean toward that idea. I think it's a good idea.
So,
I did the math. So on 278, which is kind of in between the 413 and
Did you check it with Rubio? I'm not sure.
the math. Yeah, I'll double check it with Rubia. It'll get a lot better once I double check it with Rubia.
Yeah.
If a 2% on 378 would be 7.5. It's 7,560,000. So we would. And so here's the thing, right? So if we're just looking to replace our general fund revenue, and then have an additional amount to be able to run a fully funded law enforcement department. We could get close with, probably 3.5, 4,
Okay.
right?
Seems like. What are the annual receipts from your permanent rate?
2.1
2.1.
for the county.
Yeah.
2.1 in our general fund.
Rod, did you guys look or did you explore a special district at all?
Well, we've certainly had that conversation. We haven't had extensive conversations on that topic, but my sense is that with what the voters expressed pertaining to the levy was pretty clear. It was a 60-40 defeat.
Closer than ours.
Yes, that's true. The problem is that with a special district, we would have to be raising, that levy was engineered to raise just about $6 million, which is also what we bring in on our permanent rate. So in order to actually fund the sheriff's department and the jail, if we looked at a special district to only fund those, that's about $13.5 million we would need. So that means that special district levy would have to be a little bit north of $2.
Right.
That's on top of the $1.08.
Right.
We wouldn't be able to let that go.
Right.
So that's one problem with it. It's a big pill to swallow, and I just don't see it flying. Not until it gets a lot worse. If we have a Josephine County situation in Coos County, then and that goes on for a few years, 4 years, 6 years, maybe then it would be bad enough, people would feel the pain enough, and they would say, all right, we've got to step up and pay for a sheriff's department. That's what happened over there. That's how they got their special district.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they got the levy passed, and then they let the levy go for 5 years, and then they realized, oh, we need this, and then they were like, we need it, and we need to not come back to this each every 5 years. And then
Yeah.
they got that levy, or I mean,
Yeah,
the
well,
district.
but there were, I believe, 4 intervening years there where they only had, they basically had nobody in the sheriff's department.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I know Sheriff Ward is here, and I know he's leaned towards a special district solution. John, did you want to talk at all about any of this?
Ain't gonna bite me, is he?
No, he won't. Hello, Sheriff.
I didn't bring my guard dog, but he made a snack for
Too
me.
big.
I think the best way to go for our funding is a special district. We have to have permanent funding, otherwise we're gonna be facing this stuff every year. I've done some research, we've been doing this since, I got hired with Sheriff Denny, facing the same issues with the same, thing, so, and we've talked about special districts for a long time, but there's so many of them in our county, you know. If we did a special district, it's not gonna be the money that's for 24/7. Because we just tried that, basically. We would fund the district as we would the levy, if it would have passed, but for 24/7. But getting back to what we just got out of, I think if we could keep it under $2 and do a special district on that, that's what I would support. I would support anything, to tell you the truth, just get my guys back, but other than that, yeah.
All right, thank you. So, Rod, we've been having a lot of discussions around this issue, obviously, finding a funding solution, and one of the things that we have here that you have in your county is natural resources. And Jay's been really active with ONC trying to come up with solutions. We had the court case that was going on that's been discussed and kicked back and forth. But Commissioner-elect Hollinger does have some information on another possible solution that he's been exploring. And so, Patrick, I'll turn it over to you, and you can kind of outline this. And also on the next, is it the next BOC meeting, Patrick?
It'd be Thursday, the 18th.
On the 18th, we're going to have a presentation on this specific topic. So go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah. Through the campaign process, being able to network with various people and tap into some of the ideas and connections that they have as well has been beneficial and has led me into this. I have on a flash drive here, which I'll let Brad put on his computer later, and he can email you the various files. It's got the presentation that they're going to do in a couple weeks here as well, and you're definitely invited to come down to that to listen in. But it's the Apache and Navajo County Conveyance Act of 2023. And it was an ordinance that they were able to pass through the county to manage and harvest their county resources for income. And it'd be done through an ordinance, through health and safety ordinance, done through fire management and fire protection. That's essentially the in for the county to get in and manage, and it would get a lot of the burden and cost of that management away from the state and federal entities and into the county's management. So through fees, permits, contracts, the county would be able to put that together with whatever timber company that is chosen to go in and harvest, and then they could harvest, they could sell. And then we would get our cut from the county on that. They've done lots and lots of legwork over the last 12, 15 years, putting this all through. It passed the House as well. So there is a House bill that was passed regarding this that essentially we get to piggyback on top of. So all the legislation's already been done. They've provided a roadmap for us. They've provided all of the detailed maps of all of the counties that along the West Coast that are able to do this. So there's now 12 counties that have adopted this through ordinance, simple ordinance, and they're now becoming pretty wealthy again. So this is, again, something that is still, we're exploring, but we have the top people who are in charge of this coming here in a couple weeks to present to the board and essentially answer our questions and give us the roadmap, the ins and outs, what are the legalities, what do we need to do potentially study-wise beforehand in order to move forward with this. But you know, it's not just for timber. We could use this for recreation, infrastructure, tourism, etc. So it's a great opportunity, I think, that'll be presented to us that can get us a substantial amount of money just through the timber management alone and being able to also be able to protect our county from
So-
fire management perspective.
Well, so can I piggyback? So, and so how I read it is that essentially the mechanism is the county declares an emergency, and the emergency is due to exposure to mismanaged lands and the effects of wildfires because of those mismanaged lands. And then it resolves to demanding that those lands be managed in accordance to best policy management practices to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of the residents of the county. And it puts the onus on them to do so. In a nutshell, that's kind of
That's the in.
that's the mechanism that I when I read their resolutions, that was kind of what I gleaned from it was.
And with our past fire seasons, we can certainly articulate that emergency.
Well, actually, the best articulation of that is their own made risk assessment maps that they use to penalize us with building codes and in higher insurance rates. They built the map, right? So how are you going to tell us it's not risk? You colored it red.
That's right. Yep.
And we're being penalized because you colored it red. But here's the reality.
The analogy would be, if you have a place that is deemed a public nuisance, but, a residential lot or something that's full of trash and rats and you name it, and it's deemed a public nuisance by the commissioners, they make that finding, then you can direct the owner to clean it up, and if they don't do it, then the county does it at their cost.
Yeah.
So that would be
So-
interesting.
Commissioner Taylor, were you at that Josephine meeting with me with this fire risk folks? Were you there? We were there, right? Yep. And you remember the conversation was basically around, hey, interestingly, 95% of all the fires that we face start in your lands that you are not managing, and putting the onus on private folks to manage those who are the best stewards of the land already. And so this is a way to essentially push that ball right back in their court and say, you have to do this. And the best timber practices are cutting, thinning, managing those timberlands. Now, the question that I'm going to have for the folks that are coming here is how many of these counties had been impacted by the Endangered Species Act, and that's their default, as to why they did not manage those lands, right? I mean, because that's a good big portion of why the folks here.
Glazing over the presentation, that gets addressed.
Okay, good, because that's going to be the default, right?
That's the big question
In a
for
lot of
us.
scenarios, is that's the default. However, appropriate land management practices yield revenues. I mean, face it, if Coos, Curry, Douglas could tap into their natural resource, we'd be the richest counties on the West Coast.
That's exactly why they're coming after us.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's why they've locked them up, right?
We
And
were.
so,
That's why we got in this situation. We were, these counties, the ONC counties were the richest counties, and that's why we have all these special districts.
So the couple of counties that adopted this initially received federal recognition and won stewardship management awards from the federal government based off of what I just gave you.
Wow. Well, that sounds like a very plausible path forward.
Very plausible path forward,
Yeah. And
No,
I
but very
have a-
potentially lucrative path forward for all of our counties.
Right, right. Well, and I have a sense that perhaps such a strategy combined with implementation of the natural outcome of the Chevron decision last week could just have great effects for our freedom to utilize our resources. I see, so many bureaucratic intrusions upon what are our rightful revenues,
well,
right?
that in essence could be essentially the catalyst on the ONC, because it's the federal bureaucracies who are imposing the law that's not allowing us to tap into those with the Chevron I can't say that word right, but that decision being made, taking their ability to interpret the law out of their hands, I think could get us a direct line right back to where we need to be.
Seems like an agency presumption that an endangered species thrives best subject to catastrophic wildfire would be a pretty easy one to rebut.
I think that would probably say yeah. And then when you have a 2016 study that says, oh, wait, it's not actually the old growth being hindered, it's the barred owl.
Yeah.
That's their natural predator.
Which now
Right,
we
so-
see this morning, the plan to start hunting them is moving forward.
Right. Yeah. So,
Menace.
so that the Chevron decision could play as a strong catalyst for this, and essentially, I don't know. I don't want to speculate that that's not the reason why the Supreme Court decided not to hear this case, because they knew this other one was coming down. But we have a contract, right, with the federal government
The 1937 ONC Act.
that is not being
That's right.
fulfilled, and it's not being fulfilled by the basis of bureaucratic departments, not legislative decisions. They have not changed the contract. They have not voided the contract. The contract is still in effect. And if those bureaucracies don't have the ability to interpret the law in a manner that outside their jurisdiction, then we need to press on that. But I think doing this in conjunction with some of these other, we need to put pressure back on.
Yes, we do.
That's key number one as we search for these funding solutions.
And we need to do it unified.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And they may turn us down, and they may fight back on environmental issues, whatever, but we can certainly proceed forward and push every bit of this. And if we do it together, I think it's a louder voice for sure.
Yes, indeed.
So that is a light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. But Patrick also has another idea that is less less money, but right now every penny counts. So this would kind of fill some gaps in the
Yeah.
meantime. So go ahead.
This would be another funding solution to help Sheriff Ward get some at least a couple more deputies. I know Coos County doesn't quite have the same numbers as Curry County as far as recreational chartered sport fishermen. You know, the Rogue River and the Chetco River and the Elkin Sixes, they get fished a lot by a majority out of county and out of state fishing guides. They don't pay any taxes here. They come, set up shop, or come in, come out, however they choose to do so, and make a pretty decent living for themselves and go home after the seasons. So that's all fine and good. They bring plenty of people here to the local area who eat in our restaurants and stay in our hotels, etc. Spend money. So that's great, and that's definitely not something that we're overlooking while thinking about this either. However, the idea behind this is it's an annual fee charged to out of county and out of state fishermen that come to our county to fish. It'd be a fishing permit fee, annual fee, and the idea came from Pyramid Lake, which is outside of Reno, and it's Indian reservation land out there, but they charge about $7,500 per year to a guide if you want to come guide there and do your business. Pretty good chunk of money that they get paid, and people still come out there and they guide, and it's a hot fishery. It's one of the top fisheries, that's developed over the last 20 years and on the West Coast. So why not apply something like that to our county and generate some revenue from others who are using our resource here, and essentially not paying back into the system themselves personally, although they do bring some money to the economy for us. So my idea was to charge a similar fee annually to those specific out of county and out of state fishing guides to come here and fish, run their business. We get fishing here almost year round. Each river has a little bit of a different season, but there's only really a couple months that are downtime. But based off of numbers from last year, so I sit on the Port of Gold Beach as well, and we developed a permit last year, a sea lion patrol permit, so that we can keep and manage our federal hazing permit that we have for sea lions. So we have a list of all of the guides that purchased the permit from us, and we have about, this would be Rogue River specific I'm talking about right now, but we have about 20 local guides, and then the guides that came from out of the area just last year is about 45. And this year is anticipated to get several more out-of-state fishing guides, considering California's closed again for their salmon fishery. But I would guesstimate upwards of this year maybe 50 to 60 out-of-state or out-of-county guides in Curry County operating, and so it could potentially generate anywhere from $350,000 to $500,000 annually for that. So it's just another idea and another thought to generate some income.
It sounds like a great idea. I do wonder how applying an out-of-state fee or a fee to out-of-state guides differs from applying a fee to out-of-state short-term rental owners?
It doesn't, it wouldn't work.
That's what I was wondering if that,
Also, I mean, I hate to say this, but somebody's got to say it. If you got a guide coming in from Reading, for example, where are they bringing their fishermen from? Reading. They're bringing this out-of-state guides. Actually, what they're doing is feeding our tourist economy. So there's no difference there. You know, a lot of these guys that aren't in the county are at the other end of the road. They're in Medford, they're in Grants Pass. There's a bunch of them. There are people that grew up here that no longer live here that come back and work as guides. I looked at the list. And so, I mean, now there's, you know, if you wanted to charge every guide, I suppose you could, but then we're also into the issue is, you know, that river's it's not a Curry County river. It's a river that belongs to the people of the United States. It happens to flow through Curry County. And I think we want to be a little bit careful about, about establishing this kind of jurisdiction over it. I think a lot of people would be not comfortable with that. But in the meantime, I look at, you know, when you see, you know, for example, as I looked at the list of guides, and I see that people coming from down there in like Central California, that, you know, where they can't fish down there. Well, those guys have client lists, and those people come. And they fill up the motels, and that's what they're doing. You know, the locals here who go fishing with local guides, they usually know the local guides, right? They have a relationship with those guys, and a lot of those local guides have, I shouldn't say guides, one, you know, Val's one, for example, could be anybody, but you know, those people have client lists, and some of them extend across the United States. So I think that it would, I do think it's a very similar situation. If you want to run a business now, if you want to charge people to have an out of county business license to do business in the county, that's one thing, and I think we have that already. But I think specifically for this would be, it could be deemed to be a restraint on trade and activities.
So there is another question that comes to mind, Counselor, on that point, and that is that the state charges quite a bit more for out-of-state hunting license, fishing license. So how does that square in light of your analysis of these other two issues? Okay, well, so out-of-state people, okay, the game, the wildlife of the area is the property of the local. You know, if you're a local person and you're taking that game, that's one thing. But of course, there's probably, so if you're talking out-of-state guides, I'm sure they charge more for that as well. At the state level, they don't? Okay,
Just for the license to fish?
Just for the license to fish. So for them to come and fish here through the Oregon State Marine Board, it's $150 a year for everybody.
As a guide? Yeah.
But the fishing license itself and the hunting license
Non-resident,
itself is quite a bit more.
But those none of that revenue goes to the county.
Well, I understand that. I'm talking about the legal principle of the differential in fee, in-state, out-of-state. So if it's legal for the state to charge more for a hunting license or a fishing license for an out-of-state, then why would it not be legal for the county to charge a fee to an out-of-state guide and not to a local one?
It would be a business license fee.
And that's what I was just about to say too, is I think that's the workaround, is it doesn't have to be a business license and not a fishing permit.
Yeah. But I see your point. I see your point. It's a legitimate scenario. I mean, it depends on what you want. Do you want to restrain out of state activity on the river by making it cost prohibitive, or do you want to I mean, you have to do a cost benefit. If if you're gonna be taking, if you're gonna be charging $8,000 per fishing guide, that's gonna have an effect on, that will have some effect. We don't know what that is till you do it. But at the same time, if, you know, right now, you've got money coming in from, and I don't know what that is, and a lot of these guides, as we looked at that list, you know, there are a lot of local guides that aren't listed, you know, it's sort of, it's similar to the short-term rental issue, because it's kind of it's a non-regulated area in general. So, like when you said, when you're talking about your fee, and you're like, well, we don't know how many short-term rentals we have, and a lot of them aren't. It's the same scenario that we have right here. I actually think that probably, if we go back to the short-term rental approach, I really think that our approach that we took with the ordinance allowing short-term rentals that wasn't the best way to go. I would like to do a yearly license as opposed to this land use approval thing, which is a permanent property right for a thing that really is not very different than your fishing business, right? And so every year, then there's revenue that will be generated, and if you're not conforming, then it's a lot easier to police. Whereas when we have a land use, you know, if we've already given this land use permit, and our ordinance is this really amorphous thing that says that the planning director, who would, at this point would be me, but it could be anybody, this person's gonna have all of this power that's gonna be saying, well, you got 3 complaints, and one of them was from my brother-in-law. I mean, it's gonna be a lot of weird stuff, and that's gonna result, when I look at things, I like to look at things in a way that we can minimize litigation. And so as you go forward in figuring out ways to extract money from the short-term rental business industry, which I think is a great source, because as you say, it does have an impact. It has a big impact on the services that we provide. But that's across the board. It's not just for the short-term rental owners that are from out of state. It's everybody. So I think that them participating at a different level would makes a lot more sense. And I think we just have to be careful about how we do that, so that we don't, the way that it is right now, with our ordinance, we have this amorphous thing, and we were supposed to have code enforcement go out there and look, and it's, nothing really works, and the end result is we're gonna be in court with people, and then you've got a judge who's gonna be saying, you promise not to do it again? And then we're gonna charge you $50 instead of the $1,500. You can't, when you've involved the state courts, all of a sudden you got a third player in the room, and it doesn't usually work out. You never want to build your business plan based on litigation. And so I think that what we should do on our short-term rentals is go back and look at that, and then come up with a different way that we can.
Well, the one way it sounds like that just got kind of semi-hashed out right here is an out-of-state business license. Because your short-term rental out of state or out of county owners, you're gonna have you have guides that are out of county, and then the other
one, it's the same for everybody.
Well, and then the other business owners that are out of county are your corporate organizations, right? So having an out of county business license that is that differs from the in county, it captures all of these that you were talking about. It's a mechanism to catch all. Now, here's the key piece of this whole piece is enforcement, right? It's the right now, we were supposed to get all of our business licenses in the beginning of the fiscal year, and I think we get 240 businesses registered again this year, but I don't think that's nearly where we need to be, especially when we're talking about, I mean, you just had 50 on the Rogue, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a quarter of them. Then you go down to the Checo,
right?
And then you have all the other businesses that are operating annually. So plus the STRs, right? So
I don't really know how it is on the Rogue, but I do know that if you go down to the Checo, it's a whole lot of California plates.
Well, I mean,
That's kind of like it is here too.
But if you had let's just say let's just use easy numbers, right? So right now, it's $100 for a business license, a county business license. If it's $1,000 for an out-of-county business license, the corporate folks, the Chevrons and the others, they're not going to blink, right, at a situation like that. But it's going to make your short-term rentals folks have to pay more. It's going to make those, you know, like,
$1,000.
and then it's equal across the board in terms of you want to come out of county to do business in our county.
And then it's black and white enforcement too. It's not, there's not, it's not this open question of, well, I wasn't really running a short-term rental, you know, I mean, if, you know, then we do a few of those, we do a few investigations, but we'll have to have some baseline where we say, okay, this is what, you know, and it can't be just your mean neighbor turning in because we don't like Patrick and we say he's running a short-term rental. Well, it's kids there. You know, we have to have third-party, you know, investigations, but it can be pretty straightforward. And a lot of those are going to be self-proving because in order to market these, you go on VRBO, you have to go, you know, you can look those up, and then it's prima facie evidence, and you're done before you start.
Now, you know, the key factor, obviously, that we have to really consider is that although the revenues that the STR itself is generating generally won't come back to the county because they're going to go to this out-of-county owner, generally.
Right.
But the folks who are staying there will be contributing to the economy, just like the folks who are on that boat. They're bringing people in to spend money, which is, you know, it's for us, it's a giant economic driver, right? And so, you know, we there's a balance. We want to ensure that we don't hinder that, but we also want to make sure that the folks who are taking advantage of the opportunity of our amazing area, bringing people to our amazing area and benefiting outside of our county, have also pay their fair.
And we also might want to hybridize the short-term rental part of that to the degree that you'd need you know, how does this work? Well, I guess it would be very difficult to do that, but I know that we have some people that live in this county that have numerous short-term rentals. And that can be, the example I'm thinking of is it's resulting in a lot of, you know, demand by the county responding to complaints and so forth by law enforcement on a pretty regular basis. So you look at that. Anyway, it's something to think about.
Yeah, well, and it's a 21st century business model right now, right? I mean, it is the reality that was accelerated during COVID when the government said if you had a long-term rental, you didn't have to pay your rent and you couldn't be kicked out. So as soon as those restrictions were removed, all those folks who had long-term rentals said we're going to do short-term rentals because we can control the outcome, and that in itself, I mean,
Can't blame them.
contributed to our housing issues. It was not it's hard for me to put the onus on the short-term rental owners when they're protecting their assets from the government making laws like that. You know, and so, but I think we just discussed maybe a more broad avenue of capturing some of this.
I am all for the business license approach.
You know,
That's pretty streamlined and not
Well,
litigation based.
the part that I really like about this idea is we won't know what kind of revenue it generates because we got to get an idea of how many out-of-county business owners we truly have. But, you know, let's just say it's 100, okay? That's 100,000. And like you had said, if that 100,000 is then utilized to offset future development costs to promote more development, then it's a system that pays into itself to enhance our county systems financially, long term. You know, 100 grand is not going to go a long ways towards, long term funding towards it essentially fund the person who's going to enforce it out the gate. But, you know, if there's some long-term strategy that reduces cost of development, and we do want development, we do want that,
Right.
you know, the more inviting we can make it,
That's right. One thing that occurs to me as well about the
out-of-county business license, actually, this came to my mind even when we were just discussing the out-of-state or out-of-county guide fee. I think that you mentioned, there's a sweet spot where you can impose this fee without having a deleterious effect on your actual incoming business, right? Because the fact of the matter is that most of these people incoming, they're already used to paying sales tax at home. Well, if our sales tax rate is substantially lower than theirs, or if the fee is substantially lower, that's not gonna really shut down that trade, number one. And number two, they don't have these kind of fish. They just don't. So,
Right.
they're
Well,
still gonna come.
And if you were to take that one step further on the STRs, what a more inviting place to build your STR empire where your property taxes near nothing, right? I mean, they could buy the same property that's not Ocean View and pay twice as much in property tax, so it makes more sense in the long run. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
On those annual costs. So paying an extra $1,000 or $2,000 a year it's not going to be a barrier
Right.
for an individual who wants to, do that here.
Right.
Especially,
Well, the general out-of-county business license fee annualized does greatly broaden the base. It certainly does in Coos County, and I know you've got some regional and national chains here, and I'm sure there are a lot of business enterprises in Curry County that are out of it seems like a very, very good avenue to pursue some analysis and see exactly what could be generated there and at what rate, and what rate would be palatable and not be a disincentive to those businesses. That sounds like a really great additional idea added on the stack here.
it's going to take a lot of multiple good ideas, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's going to be very hard to find a magic bullet.
Yep, that's right.
A lot of little things.
I mean, I know we have the transient lodging tax, but what about a transient consumption fee?
So that was kicked
That
around.
would exclude citizens.
Essentially, really what Rod talked about, the 5%,
Yeah, right.
out of
Right.
non-citizen sales tax, right?
Yeah.
I think that was kicked around in a previous commission.
It was discussed, yeah.
But I
I
think,
mean, like Rod said, whether you come from California, Nevada, Utah, Idaho, Washington, they're already paying sales tax.
Right.
And the sales tax is well north of 5%. Already used to it.
yeah. No, for sure. I mean, right now, I think the reason why the Brookings Fred Meyer is what is it? Is it the number one grossing Fred Meyer
Usually.
on the West Coast?
Wow.
It's because everybody from Crescent City shops there because there's no sales tax, right? And so, because we're 7 miles away or whatever it is, 21 miles
What
away.
is their tax rate in Humboldt County or in?
In Del Norte County, I believe it's 9. Is that right? 9%?
So even if you're at 4, they would still come, most of them.
Certainly. That's that we're talking about the sweet spot thing again. Yeah. Yeah.
But we
Plus, they'll be
definitely-
getting out of Crescent City.
Yeah.
Well, we definitely learned from this last election cycle that citizens of their counties were not willing to increase their taxes,
That's true.
no matter how much. So asking them to pay a tax isn't going to pass unless there's no burden to them.
Which circles back to the real solution, which would be timber. And we'll have that meeting on the 18th. And I can tell you that if that presentation is clear, concise, and has the information we need, I'm gonna wanna declare whatever emergency we need to declare and get that moving sooner than later.
So the risk assessment maps will really help move that forward because it's gonna require study. So if we can utilize the whatever it was, the $3 million study that the state gave OSU to do the fire map study, we can pull from that data to identify a lot of the needed information. And one thing that I'm just going out on a limb here, but I think it wouldn't be out of bounds to invite not only you, but Commissioner Maine and Sweet, and do a dual commission meeting for that discussion.
And how about Douglas also?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be good to get Freeman. The sound of a silent chainsaw is what did he say? He took a chainsaw on the floor legislation, and he started it up in the middle of the legislation and said, "This is the sound of money being made."
Yeah, that's right. What time on the 18th is that presentation?
6 p.m. is the start of the BOC meeting.
That's a Thursday, so that's a 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock
Oh, sorry,
meeting.
4 o'clock. Yeah,
4 o'clock
4
meeting.
o'clock meeting. 4 p.m. Yeah, 4 p.m. on the.
Which makes for the travel a little more palatable.
All right. Very good. Well, that would be very interesting to come participate in, and I'm certain that my fellows would embrace the opportunity to come down and meet together with you all and continue to work through some of these questions.
Yeah, I mean, we do, I think, have Zoom capabilities, but it's always better to do things in person when we can.
So, yeah, it's a whole different world. All right, very good.
All
I
right.
feel like this has been a very productive time, and I really appreciate you guys carving out the time to meet with me and engage in this conversation. Appreciate the ideas that we tabled up here. Just great stuff, and I will be doing some research on this packet here, Patrick. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Pleasure meeting you.
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks for making the trip, Rod, and appreciate the conversation. It's been good. It's been helpful.
Yeah.
Any further discussion?
Just keep those lines of communication open.
Yep.
Yep.
We got to share ideas. We got to figure it out.
We do. We have to work together.
Yep.
All right. It's 3:25, and I will conclude this workshop. Thank you.